late April here in Fremont, California. The warm season is well upon us. Spring is moving right along, and my apple trees and my pear trees have ceased blooming. The bees are out of the trees, and so now it's time to concern myself with pest control. In this area of the country, the predominant pests we have on the apple trees are, number one is the Coddling Moth, or what sometimes is called the apple worm. Very prevalent, terrible insect problem here. We also have trouble with fire blight, and then again we have the woolly apple aphid, which is an apple aphid that causes galling in the branches and so on, even gets into the roots and is not a friendly little critter. Late April is the time that we usually approach control for most of our insects on apples and pears here. The key is that the flowers have fallen out of the trees. That's very important, and that we'd have pea to marble size fruit beginning to form. If we still had flowers in the trees, would withhold pest control, because we can't use any of the sprays that are effective on Coddling Moth while there might still be bees in the trees. Any spray that will work on a Coddling Moth will also affect a bee. The only exception to that might be Bacillus thuringiensis. Could be used with bees, but it's not very effective on the Coddling Moth, so I refrain from using it. When dealing with Coddling Moth in apples, one of the common natural controls here is a Coddling Moth trap. This is specifically designed for this creature. It doesn't really work to control them as much as you use this as a monitor for when they're present. It has a pheromone attractant that's placed in the trap. The trap is hung in the tree at a level that you can observe the inside of the trap. The pheromone smells like female Coddling moths, and so the males are drawn into the trap. Of course, we all know that it only takes one male, and they can impregnate a whole lot of female moths. So controlling the male moth doesn't really solve the problem. What it does do, though, is tell us what time of the year that we should come out into the garden and perhaps apply some sort of a spray program to our trees. The materials that I use when spraying for both woolly apple aphids and for Coddling Moth is, number one, a horticultural oil. A horticultural oil will stick to the tree and you work as a fixative. It will kill aphids by smothering them. It also kills the eggs of the Coddling Moth by smothering the egg. Horticultural oil is non-toxic to the bee. Alright, so this is relatively safe to use on anything except for soft-bodied insects. So it will kill aphids, it kills mealybugs, it will kill mites, it also kills scale insects, but it has little effect on things like ladybugs and bees and other beneficials in the garden. So this one we don't have to be quite as careful about when we're using it, but I will mix it with this material here, which is spinosad. And spinosad is a bacteria that was found in a rum distillery in Barbados. The bacteria works on almost any kind of a hard-bodied insect, including ants, by the way, so this is a biological control for ant populations. It also works on most types of worms, that is, leaf-chewing worms, cabbage moths, and so on. Although if you have cabbage moth problems, you're better off using BT, because BT doesn't affect bees. This one will affect bees if you put it on when there's flowers in the tree. So that's why we're waiting until the flowers have fallen out of the tree. I don't usually use the traps anymore to indicate when the moths are present, because in this area, about the time that the flowers are down, the moths usually become present. This stuff will hold up for a couple of weeks in this climate in my tree, since we don't rain here. That usually manages to get me on target. But if you're in a rainier climate, or if you are not sure when the moths are showing up, you definitely want to hang the traps. And when you see the ugly old gray moths showing up inside the trap, you're going to want to produce some sort of a spray program, because they'll be breeding and laying eggs within 2 weeks of the first moths that you find in your trap. So use the traps as monitors. They're not going to solve your problem. Oil will solve the aphid problem. Oil will also solve the egg problem from coddling moth eggs on your fruit. Oil will also work if you're in the eastern U.S. and you're having trouble with the apple maggot. That's the fly that lays eggs on apples. Now that's later in the season. You won't be using it now. You can use the same spray though, a combination of spinosad and oil for the apple maggot. Your traps for apple maggots are going to be different. Usually they use a red styrofoam Christmas tree ornament coated in tanglefoot, which is a stickum, a vegetable goop, and they hang them up in the trees because it's the red color that attracts the apple maggot. We don't have them here, thank goodness, but we do have the coddling moths, and so spinosad is the cure here. The best way to apply a spray program in any capacity, whether it's with your apple trees, in the vegetable garden, or whatever, is with a tank or a backpack sprayer. There are a lot of hand pump trigger sprayers out there. There's also some hose-on type applicators. Most of them really don't do a very good job. They tend to either wear your hand out by pumping, and then you get carpal tunnel syndrome, or they distribute the material literally everywhere and you can't control it. With a tank sprayer like this one, we can not only control exactly where the material's going, but we can also mix multiple materials. So it's possible to put both an insecticide and a fungicide on at the same time when you're using a tool like this one. So the timing when spraying for the coddling moth will be when your apples are anywhere between the size of a pea upwards to like these right here. They're about the size of a marble, roughly. And so pea to marble size is good. As I said, that means that the flowers are off the tree. And when using a tank sprayer like this, the main issue here is to make sure that we're actually hitting the fruit clusters. We're going to hit the branches too, and we'll also be hitting the leaves and so on, but the main point is to try to get the spray right on top of the fruit. So you're going to walk around inside and outside the tree while you're doing this. Make sure that you can coat all those apples, because when the moths come and start to breed, the place they're going to go is right to those little apples, and they're going to start laying eggs all over the surface. So that's where you want your insecticides. So as you're out there in the orchard and you're spraying, you want to take a look, looking for those fruits, and here they are. But then you will also, I suspect, see some of this stuff here, which this is deadwood that's been caused by a disease called fire blight. It's vectored into the flowers of the tree by the pollinating insects from an infected plant somewhere. The death is pretty quick. Transmission goes right into the flower, spreads right into the cambrium, and then it begins to die back. It's usually pretty easy to diagnose because there's going to be flowers right nearby the infection, and the leaves will be turned black to brown, look like they were burned. That's why we call it fire blight. So I'm keeping an eye out here as I'm spraying for insects for this particular disease. There are a few sprays a person can use. An organic one would be Serenade. Serenade is Bacillus subtilis. That's a bacteria that, if applied into the flowers while they're still open, you could control the spread of the fire blight bacteria. After the fact, there is also a non-organic spray called Agrifos, which I don't use and I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is legal and labeled for this application. I just go through with a pruning shear and I take off all signs of fire blight damage well below the last sign. In this case, I'd say that most of this whole spur should really be cut out of the tree. And so ideally, you want to go about 12 inches below the last sign of fire blight when you cut this out of the tree. I see there's a little bit right here too. See that? In this particular type of tree, this is a columnar apple, the disease doesn't spread very far very fast. It really compartmentalizes quickly, and so I find it easy to just cut it out of the tree. If you have a pear tree like a Bartlett, there it spreads like wildfire, okay? And so you're really going to have to take a lot of wood out. You want to be right on top of the job, right after flowering, looking for the fire blight problem in the tree. So I'm combining my insecticide spray for Coddling Moth and for aphids with my inspection for fire blight. Later, I'll come back with a pair of pruning shears. I'll remove the fire blight from my trees so it doesn't spread any further. I will clean my pruning shears with alcohol between every cut so I don't spread the disease. That's important. So, that's about all there is to know about controlling Coddling Moth and aphids in your apple trees in spring. Make sure you go on out and get yourself a decent tank sprayer. The only other thing I might say about this before closing is that you want to wash out your tank sprayer. Don't go leaving the extra spray in there. Mix your spray in small batches. Spray it all out. If you still have some left in the tank, maybe you want to go next door and spray your neighbor's tree for them. Be a nice thing to do. And then when you're all done, first thing, clean the sprayer out with water. Close it back up with water on the inside and push fresh water through your wand so you don't have fluids trapped inside the wand, the stem, and the valve. So you wash everything out with fresh water, then you dump the water out of the sprayer, close it back up, pump it up one more time, blow the air through the wand so it comes out dry, then open the whole works up, drain it out, and let it sit with the plunger out. Let it set loosely in the rim perhaps, but remove the plunger. Don't close the sprayer up and put it back on your shelf with the cork in place, because the humidity that's in there will probably just begin eating parts. So you can actually make a tank sprayer last for 20 or 30 years with only a few minor seals and gaskets if you clean it out every time you use it. Alrighty, so have some delicious apple cider and applesauce this year. Get rid of those nasty old moths so you haven't got any worms in your apples, and happy gardening. Check you out next time. Thanks a lot for watching.